Hi, it's Alison from Blue Cat Sewing, and today I'm going to show you how to make one of these. It's what I call my flip and clip peg bag. There's two patterns that you can download. You get the medium and large on one, and you get the extra large and the extra large on the other. So you can choose which one to download, or maybe get both. Here's another one I made out of some vintage fabric and some old denim. Here's how it works. You pop your clothespins inside, or whatever you want, and when you're bringing it inside, fold it over, clip the carabiner around the loop, and then it's nice and tidy in your cupboard or on your shelf. You get all the written instructions, all the patterns to print out, but here's the tutorial to take you through it. The first thing to do is to take the top loop and the back loop and press both long raw edges into the centre. And then once you've done that, fold it in half again so that all the raw edges are on the inside, enclosed. So you do this to the top loop and the back loop. And then stitch a row of stitching down the edge to enclose it all. Then take your back piece and your front piece and stitch down the first side seam. You'll notice that it looks as though one edge is longer than the other, but that's just the cut line. It's where you're going to stitch that's important, and they match. So if you pin it in place and stitch along that line, using the edge of your foot on your machine as a guide, it's about 1/4 of an inch. Then when you finish sewing, you should notice that there's a nice smooth line where the curves curve around the top of the peg bag and along the bottom. There you can see curve along the top, it's nice and smooth, and along the bottom as well. So then do the same to the other side, pinning in place and stitching on your machine. You'll notice that I'm pressing that button there. That's just to do a reverse stitch at the beginning and the end of each seam. Then press those seams open, and then you'll notice the little marks at the top and bottom there where we need to put the loops. So we need the longest loop, which is for the back, fold it in half, and it's going to go at the bottom. So you put it on the right side of the fabric. We turn it over, you'll see that I'm finding the centre because I've got a little mark there that I took from the pattern piece. There's the centre. And then pin the loop in place and stitch it on your machine. I usually stitch over pins because I place them at right angles, but if it's a really bulky area, it might be a good idea to take the pin out. Now we're on to the bottom. So you'll notice again that I've got the little markings taken from the pattern piece, and I'm going to place the first notch onto the centre front of the peg bag, matching the notches and placing the fabric right side together. So place the pin at the centre front and then find the next notch along. Place a pin there. Do this to all 4 sides of the circle. There's the centre back. Here's the last one. And then we need a few more pins. So I'm just going to divide each of these quarters into half and place a pin matching all the raw edges. So just give it a little manipulation with your fingers. And then once all 8 pins are in place, then you're ready to sew. You may find this a little tricky, but you just take it slowly. Keep manipulating the fabric with your fingers. Smooth it out so that you can feel that there's no bumps underneath where there might be a little tuck. Just take your time. Keep moving the fabric underneath so it doesn't bunch up. And then a reverse stitch again at the end to hold it. Then once all your pins are out, we're ready to turn it through to the right side. Smooth it out so that you've got a nice edge, and then take your iron and just press with your hand inside, just pushing the seam out so that you get a nice smooth edge at the same time. That's it. That's the outside of your peg bag. Now we're on to the lining. So you do exactly the same with the lining. Both side seams, press them, and then do the base in exactly the same way. You'll notice that I've got a label that I've put on in the lining fabric. Obviously that's something that I do, but probably not something that you'll need to do. I'm making the medium one here. You can see the little M that I've got for medium, but I do make 4 different sizes. You get the medium and the large with one download, and then the extra large and the extra large with the other download. But if you visit my Etsy shop, you'll find some that are already made available to buy. So that's the lining done. And now we don't turn that through. We just tuck it inside with the wrong sides together and pin all the way around that opening, matching the seams, matching the centre front. I'm placing my pins this way rather than at right angles because I'm going to put the binding on, and I find it easier to do my pins all this way so that I can remove the pins as I'm stitching the binding. For me, that's the easiest way. You may prefer to tack this or baste this first to hold everything in place before you put the binding on. Now with the binding, just turn one edge under about a centimetre, maybe a little bit less than a centimetre, all the way along, and use the other edge, the one that's not turned under, to stitch onto that open edge of your peg bag. Again, take it slowly, use the edge of your machine foot to find the raw edges. And there you can see a pin, so I'm going to remove that in a moment once I've got everything in the right place. I've put my needle down at that point just to hold it in place while I manipulate it. It just stops the whole thing moving too much while I'm manipulating the fabric. Just keep moving it, manipulating everything with your fingers so that you keep all the raw edges together. Don't forget to take the pins out as you go, otherwise you could break your needle. Again, you could tack this first if you wanted to, if you find it easier. And then place that part of the peg bag over the end of your ironing board and just press that seam so that the raw edges go towards the binding. Just use the tip of your iron. And now we're going to turn. You can see where I pressed that binding under a little bit earlier on. Turn that in, enclose all the raw edges and put a pin into that area there where the seam is. So you won't see any raw edges at all. And we're going to sew in that ditch in a minute. So make sure that you've got enough room for your stitching line and have a little bit of an overlap. Otherwise, you might find it hard to get your stitching to hold the binding in place. Okay, so place your needle right in that ditch. And again, don't forget to remove your pins. Try and stick to that line as much as you can. And there you can see the bindings hold it all in place. You can press that if you want. And then we need to do the top seam. We're nearly there now. So match your raw edges along that diagonal line. And I pop a pin at right angles to the raw edge because I'm going to sew over the pins. Oh, I've taken that pin out there. Back stitching again at the beginning of the seam and the end. And now I can cut away that bit of binding. And now I've got my zigzag stitch selected. Reverse at the beginning of the seam and at the end, enclosing all those raw edges within the stitching. There we go. Now I'm going to press that seam to one side. And then just trim off that top. Now for the top loop, again, fold that in half, poke the raw edges inside and try and get them to meet the other raw edges from the peg bag. You can have the loop sticking out a little bit, just to be sure it's not going to come apart at all. And then a straight line of stitching, and then change to a zigzag stitch and neaten off those raw edges. Turn it through. Place your carabiner into the top loop. And it's all done. Well done. Don't forget to share your makes with me on social media and give me a follow. Happy sewing!